I generally don't talk Bills and Sabres when I have a guest like you on because this interview is more about giving fans a chance to know more about you. But I do have to ask you about the Sabres. What the hell happened this season? How did something so good this year get so bad in such epic fashion? And what do you think needs to happen when this season's over, which is going to be, I mean, we're taping this, their second last game's going on right now. You got the finale Saturday, and that's the end of the season. What's going to happen come next week? Anything?
Well, it'll be interesting. That Monday news conference, is going to be interesting. Big question. The biggest question surrounds the head coach, right?
Sure.
And the issues go far beyond the head coach, but I do think the questions about Phil Housley are legitimate. I asked Terry Pegula as recently as last week, if you heard that interview, how he justifies bringing Housley back, given the way the season has turned. And he talks about how he thinks he's a good coach, was a good player, and that he'll develop as a coach. And he feels comfortable with the communication in the front office and that sort of thing, and how it's translated to some extent on the ice. It's become clear to me that whatever message Housley is trying to send isn't being received to the extent that it needs to be. Okay? And coaching is challenging these days in the sense that I remember talking to Lindy Ruff right before he was fired, and he was pretty open about the fact that kind of the hard edge style of coaching is by the boards. Players expect different, and you don't get the most out of players by doing it that way. And Ruff was trying to change his approach, but he just couldn't evolve it quickly enough. And, he was ultimately fired. So I wonder about Housley, like I wonder about any other coach, but especially with the way the season has turned. And they weren't as good as the 10-game win streak. I mean, you're a knowledgeable guy. I see you on Twitter, man. You knew. I mean, there was a lot of smoke and mirrors involved with that 10-game win streak. They were coming from behind in those games. The goaltending was beyond phenomenal, right? You knew that it was going to level off. At the time, Stu Boyer will tell you this if you ever talk to him. At the time they won 10 in a row, I said to him, Stu, this team is still going to fight to get into the postseason. And as it turns out, I was too optimistic.
Yeah.
So I was always realistic about it, but to not be able to win back-to-back games and to not, I hate to use the term quit on Housley, but it sure looked like that some nights.
Sure.
So I think they have to make a decision on him, and how effective he is as a head coach remains very much to be seen. Having said that, I mean, is Skinner going to resign? I don't know.
Do you feel like that was a foregone? Was that a foregone conclusion a month ago that if the money was right, or maybe 2 months ago, if the money was on par with someone else, that he would have stayed here? But now it's like, I don't know.
No, you listened to him yesterday. He's leaving his options wide open, as he probably should.
Right.
I think there's the proximity to his home in Toronto, that issue, but, airplanes are effective. Like if the money's right and the opportunity's right somewhere else, I think he's going to go ahead and take it. Especially, I mean, there's questions about the head coach, the direction this thing is headed in. I mean, wouldn't you have those questions if you were him?
Oh, absolutely.
I would.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of where that situation is. I think they have a lot of terrific young talent. And building around, like Pegula talked about, of course, you're building around Jack Eichel and Rasmus Dahlin. But, Eichel has not been in a playoff series yet.
Right.
That concerns me. Like, I remember Thomas Vanek's rookie year, I'm sitting with Paul Hamilton in Ottawa in that playoff series. I forget which game it was, but I'm focused on Vanek. He was like a deer in headlights, man. He didn't know what to do. He was completely overwhelmed. And I'm not saying that would be the case with Jack Eichel, but you know what I'm getting at here.
Sure.
He hasn't experienced the game at the level that the postseason brings yet. He hasn't, and that concerns me. Now, I think he's taken a step forward this year. I think he has a ways to go as a captain. But, I think they put the C on him because they wanted him to elevate it. I don't know that he was ready to be captain this year, but I think they wanted him to elevate from a leadership standpoint, given the contract they'd signed with him and everything, that was the way to go. And I get that. I understand why they did it, and I'd probably do it again. But the depth, the lack of depth, both in terms of scoring, secondary scoring, and defensively, Bottrell has to make some serious moves here. And he's got the ammunition to do it. But I mean, he's got to nail it, is what he's got to do.
Yeah.
They should be further along than they are right now. And so, I mean, and there are more questions than answers at this point. I know that Rochester's doing well, and they got some good talent coming up through, and that's really how you sustain success long-term in the NHL. You have to be able to build through the farm system, and I know that he believes in that through the draft. But they should be further along than they are. This roster is not nearly good enough, and that's on Jason Boxall more than it is Phil Housley, obviously. So more questions than answers, and I don't know what they are right now.